Broadcasting to you on WNN 1470 AM and TrentoVision.tv from the world's leading think tank laboratory, buried deep in an undisclosed building in hostile territory where evil and corruption is exposed. You're about to enter the Tom Trento Show.
Arrow border, all hands, MAGA battle station.
Tom Trento heads United West, a group that says it defends Western civilization against the onslaught of Islam.
And good afternoon, everybody. It is Thursday, October 10th already, 2013. It's 5 o'clock. You're listening to us on WNN 1470 AM, broadcasting out of Boca Raton, Florida. You can listen to us on the radio all the way from Miami up to Orlando, or you can download iHeartRadio on your smartphone or other smart app and download WWNN and play us anywhere that your smartphone or smart device works. You can watch us on TrentoVision.tv or the TeaPartyCommunity.com. You can also click on TrentoVision off the Bare Naked Islam site. And if you're listening to us in the car on your way home from work after 5 o'clock and you want to see the show later tonight, you can access our archives at youtube.com/TheUnitedWest, and you can watch today's show or any other show that we have in our archives. Over 500 shows featuring Tom Trento, who is not with us today because he is still in Israel with J. Mark Campbell and a couple of dozen other people having a very important national security briefing, and also it sounds like they're also having a lot of tourism and travel fun, and they will actually be back next week and have lots of interesting reports and topics for you. But today we are here in the studio with a special guest, Rabbi Eli Kavon from Boca Raton, Florida, Congregation Beth Ami, and he is going to be co-hosting for Tom today, and we're going to be talking about the most recent Pew poll on Jewish attitudes in the United States, 237 pages of polling information. It's absolutely unreal, and why bother being Jewish is going to be our topic for today. And before we get to why bother being Jewish and tell you some of the shocking statistics about Jewish and Christian attitudes towards Israel in this country, we're going to actually go to Israel right now and play for you Tom's interview he sent us earlier today to let us know what's going on over in Israel. So do we have that video ready? And then we'll be right back. So watch and listen. Now. Do it.
Hi, Tom Trento and J. Mark Campbell here in Israel. But tonight, folks, October 10th, 2013, Thursday, we're in a very unique place in Israel. If you travel south from Jerusalem through the Negev, which is basically a big desert, you finally will get to this unbelievable resort town of Eilat. That's where we are in a fabulous hotel. And today, early this morning, we took off our normal tour with Frank Gaffney. All of that ended yesterday. But a small group of us continued on to Eilat. And in particular, we went to Jordan today, to the Muslim country of Jordan. It was an experience, to say the least. And I was not very comfortable, as you could imagine. Doesn't take much to Google my name and and then we got a situation on our hands. But we took the bus up from Eilat to the Jordanian checkpoint, which was only about a mile or so. Here in Eilat, we're on the border of Jordan and very close to Saudi Arabia. We're going to tell you some of the national security issues that happened today. But we went through the checkpoint through Israel on the border of Eilat, and it's bright and airy and air-conditioned and clean. And then you get on the other side into Jordan. and it's another world. I mean, yeah, they need the Jordanians, and they are our friends in very interesting way on national security issues. But it is still a country, 92% Sunni Muslim, 8% Christian, and 600,000 Syrian refugees, which are now comprising one of the largest cities, a temporary city in Jordan. When we went through the Jordanian border police and the checkpoints and all of that, took a 2-hour drive up a very long mountain on King's Highway and got to the city of Petra, which means rock. And it is an amazing wonder of the world to see this the city completely carved out of stone in these canyons and walls. And we're going to show you a lot of footage when we get back. Very unique experience. You could ride camels, you could ride donkeys. We rode back, and we'll show you this video when we get back. Once you get to Petra, you got to descend about a mile downhill, and you're so exhausted at the end that Mark and I took a donkey carriage with Nabil or whatever, riding one of the scariest rides of our life, going out of Petra. Wasn't it crazy? It was pretty crazy. We'll show you that, but. On the tail end of our trip, we're leaving in a couple of days. From a national security point of view, here are some of the concerns. Right now, the PA, the Palestinian Authority, is starting to make threatening statements that the peace talks have failed because, whatever reason you want to put in there. And the significance of this, we've spoken to many people on the ground here that are in the know. And they say that a possible third intifada is brewing, and that President Obama's mishandling of this whole peace talk nonsense, having the Palestinian Authority, which really did not want to enter into peace talks, and will define and deconstruct the rationale, which is amazing, for why the Palestinian Authority did not want to enter into peace talks, but they were forced to by President Obama and John Kerry. As a result, expectations have been lifted which were impossible to satisfy, and there's rumblings now that if the peace talks fail, then a third intifada, a third uprising by the Muslim youth attacking and killing Westerners and Israelis in Israel is in the brewing. So we got to keep our eyes on that. Also, not far from where we are live right this second in Eilat, just over the border in Saudi Arabia, in the Sinai, 4 Egyptian policemen were killed by terrorists today, right down the street, not far from here. Right where those lights are, on the other side over there. And that's a significant continuing development. But the news of the day, and I'm sure you got it back there in the States, President Obama, and it's having reverberations here where we are, President Obama has cut back funding to General al-Sisi, who's heading the Egyptian army and, in fact, helping lead Egypt away from the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood is furious with President Obama because they do not think he went far enough. We all know that many Muslim Brotherhood agents of influence like Umar Abedin, El-Bieri, and many others, Mohammed Majid, the head of ISNA, have the president's ear, and they are arguing a narrative that wants to put the Brotherhood back in the political positioning in Egypt. Al-Sisi wants none of that. The president cut off funding, some funding to Al-Sisi, and that's upsetting a lot of the people here who are anti-Muslim Brotherhood. Very important development. So we'll keep our eyes on that. What else, Mark?
Glad to be back in Israel.
Glad to be back. Oh, man, let me tell you, we ran into a lot of wonderful Muslim people who are just trying to make a living, giving you a donkey ride or selling you a trinket or something like that. Yeah, living on, probably $50 is a lot for them, but $50 a day. Very friendly people, all of that. But when you deal with the Jordanian, police, and we had a minder on the bus with us. When we got to the Jordanian border, a police officer rode, a Jordanian police officer. I go, this is great. Rode with us everywhere. And there was just this sense, this feeling of a discomfort, particularly our work. You know, we didn't want any of that brought to the surface, but also just it's a different place than Israel is. There's just like a heavy weight on the whole country, and so the weight of Islam is what it is. And you get back into Israel. We were so happy to go through about 5 different checkpoints back from the Jordanian border through the little demilitarized zone, a no man's land of about 80 meters, and then back on the Israeli side. And we all said, oh, thank God, it's so good to be here. Anything else?
It was just strange driving in the bus and looking donkeys and camels and sheep right outside a major city. It'd be like having donkeys, camel, and sheep right outside of Miami as you drive into it. It was just very, very strange.
We went on a side tour, just a bus tour of Aqaba, which is the only water port in all of Jordan. Jordan is landlocked except for a little bit down the bottom on the Sea of Aqaba. We went down there and drove around, and our guide, Mohammed, who was a very nice guy, was so proud of Aqaba. It was just a dumpy little town, you know, in almost a third world country kind of town, a little better than that. But Jordan is a country teetering. The Muslim Brotherhood was going after King Abdullah, and the Brotherhood's on the ropes now. So we need to maintain relationships with intelligence and military relationships with Jordan, very important. And just good to be back in a free country, Israel. I'm sure Rabbi Kavon today can extrapolate on the situation in the Sinai, the beauty of Eilat, and then the rest of the wonder that we had, a magnificent time going from northern Israel at a kibbutz on the northern border of Lebanon, over to the Golan. Oh, yesterday at the Golan, actually today at the Golan, yesterday, reported today, a Syrian shell landed by 2 Israeli soldiers, injuring both of them. Israelis immediately destroyed the mortar launcher, and it was a stray shell, supposedly. But we have all kinds of things going on, and Israelis are on top of everything. Wonderful country, fabulous trip. We have so much video. Mark was like a video maniac with 2 cameras and 1 duct tape to his head, taping everything. We're going to bring you magnificent stuff when we get back. Right now, God bless everybody, and we shall see you. We have a meeting on the beach with a little bottle of wine and a couple of cigars with a few of our friends. See you later.
Enjoy. As did Tom, enjoy.
Wow, that sounds absolutely wonderful.
That sounds great.
And just in case you were thinking when you hit that donate securely button while you're visiting theunitedwest.org that your money doesn't go to something worthwhile, I think you just got a very good picture of the good things your money can do when you support the United West and TrentoVision. Now, that was a wonderful report from Tom.
It was great.
Wasn't it? And,
you know,
and you lived and studied in Israel.
I lived and studied in Israel. I was studied for 10 months in the Judean hills in a yeshiva where the young men serve in the army. They're Orthodox, they're religious Zionists. And after college, went back to studying the Opan, the basic Hebrew courses at Hebrew University. And there's no place like it in the world. And I understand why Tom felt comfortable to be back.
Right.
You know, to be back, get out of Jordan, because the fact is that Israel is an island of democracy and stability and economic success and Nobel Prize winners. In a region that's full of autocracies, monarchies, dictatorships, destabilization, violence. So I'm sure he's happy to be back. He and Mark are happy to be back in Israel. I mean, even to visit Petra, which I've never been to, but it's supposed to be very beautiful. I'm sure it's a relief to be back in a democracy.
It's kind of ironic if you live in the United States and depending on which news you watch and read, you would think that Israel is the cause of all the turmoil in the Middle East rather than the island of tranquility in the middle of really hundreds of millions of people living in totalitarian enslavement.
Yeah.
Really, they really are.
Yeah.
Why is it that why do you think, we're going to talk about Jewish and Christian attitudes towards Israel, based on this Pew Forum polling that was done this year about Jewish and Christian, but primarily Jewish attitudes in the United States right now. Caring about Israel seems to be a real small part of the Jewish identity in this country now, especially when it's compared to the attachment that evangelical Christians have for Israel. If we could go to the Carolyn Glick article, I just want to read a couple of small paragraphs off there, and then kind of have you go over some of the statistics that you pulled out and maybe go into some background. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you're listening on the radio, go to the archives, youtube.com/The United West. We're going to put up these articles and these graphs that we're going to be talking about during the show, and definitely you want to check them out in their entirety. Here's a small portion. Whereas 73% of Jews say that remembering the Holocaust is an essential part of being Jewish, only 19% said that observing Jewish law is a vital aspect of Jewish identity. 14% say eating Jewish foods is indispensable for their Jewish identity. And 42% say that having a sense of humor is a critical part of being a Jew. Gabriel Roth, an intermarried Jewish author, welcomes these numbers. In a column in Slate, Roth claimed that the reason most cultural Jews keep traditions of any kind is a sense of guilt towards their parents and previous generations of Jews. He believes that it's time to get over the guilt. Keeping such traditions has no intrinsic meaning. How much value, he asked sneeringly, can Jewish heritage have if it signifies nothing beyond its own perpetuation? Obviously, the answer is no value. To do something you feel is intrinsically meaningless just because your forefathers did the same meaningless thing is a waste of time. If Judaism has nothing to offer beyond Locks and Seinfeld, then there is no reason to remain Jewish. Now, I've read a lot of commentaries on this poll, and to me, that is absolutely the crux of it, and that explains to me why, maybe around 40% of Jewish Americans believe that God gave the land of Israel to the Jewish people versus over 80% of evangelical Christians. So let's start from there. Why bother being Jewish? What does it mean in this day and age? And what should it mean in any age? How much should it change?
Well, what I find disturbing about these results, besides the issues of 20% of Jews who were interviewed saying they had no religion.
Right.
1 out of 5.
Right.
But what is disturbing to me, and I'm speaking as a son of a World War II veteran who fought in Europe and saw the results of the Shoah, the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. It is terribly distressing that the reason for 73% of those polled, the reason that they're Jewish is the Holocaust.
Right.
How can that be? How can it be when you have a treasure house of almost 4,000 years of culture, of heritage, of history, of belief? It's a treasure house. How can it be that genocide is the basis of one's identity? The mass murder of 6 million Jews, that's the basis of identity. That's a reason to be Jewish.
Right.
And the second in the listing
the
of what the second
yeah.
is ethics. 69% being Jewish means to lead an ethical life. Of course it means being Jewish is supposed to be leading an ethical life. But the idea that was put forth, especially by Reform rabbis even today, but in classical Reform in 19th century Germany, was that all Judaism was ethics and belief in one God, was ethics and monotheism, totally rips away the core of Judaism. And one can be an ethical Buddhist,
Right.
one can be an ethical Sikh, or an ethical evangelical, or an ethical atheist.
Right.
So to say that ethics is the basis of one's Jewish identity is almost to say that that identity is not there. Because in America in the 21st century, you can easily find somewhere else to be ethical. And we
Right.
have texts like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Thoreau
Right.
from classical American, or John Dewey. You know, there are so many other options. If it's a matter of the Holocaust, it's a matter of ethics, the Jewish community is in big trouble.
Well, when it comes to the question of ethics, it sounds like really modern Judaism, the Judaism that we inherited today, was really defined for us not by practitioners of Judaism necessarily, but by philosophers, some of whom weren't even Jewish and some of whom were actually anti-Semitic and wanted to take the religion out of Judaism. And this is where I think this whole cultural and moral relativism comes out of that movement.
I think,
Because they tried to say that Judaism is just one of something else, as opposed to something that is unique and distinctive and that gave something to the rest of the world. Now Judaism is just it's just voluntary something else. It's okay to do something else instead.
Kant, who was the greatest German Enlightenment thinker, one of the greatest thinkers of the European Enlightenment, he said, I like Jews, but Judaism should be euthanized, because the last good thing that Jews did for civilization was to give us Jesus, and they've done nothing since then.
What have you done
So,
lately?
what have you done for me lately? So, you know, in a way, it reflects...
He hasn't had the pastrami sandwich, obviously.
We hear from the gentleman from
Kings
Point.
Point, Del Rey.
So the issue, you know, what part of the problem is people think, and Jews in a big way, think of Enlightenment as being very positive,
Right.
and very tolerant, and very opening, and kumbaya.
Right.
But the Enlightenment, you look at Voltaire, or even Thomas Jefferson, who was one of my heroes, a great man, gave freedom of religion to Jews, even in Virginia, even before he was president and defender of freedom of religion.
Right.
He was not anti-Semitic, but he was a son of the Enlightenment.
Right.
And he barely mentions Judaism in his letters, but when he does, it is very negative. It's not about Jews being negative, but it's very much an Enlightenment take on Judaism. Judaism being the epitome of medieval superstition and primitive ritual, and the God of the Jews being a tribal God. And for Jefferson, who was a son of the Enlightenment, and I think believed more of Jesus as a teacher and sort of the religion of reason, very intolerant. I mean, the attitude towards Judaism is it's tribal. So inherent in the way many American Jews, the way that many Americans view religion,
Right.
is that, well, it's against universalism. It's against what brings us together as people.
Right.
Therefore, it's a hindrance. But they don't realize that culture, modern culture, is so rooted in the history of religion. And the history of the West is so rooted in religion and creativity. I mean, yes, the 30 Years' War and fighting between Protestants and Catholics, but you look at the art of Michelangelo or even of Da Vinci, who was even more of a humanist.
Right.
But of course, the Last Supper. I mean, this is a skewed modern view of what religion is, and to see religion only as this stumbling block to universal unity and to what makes us human is a big mistake.
I don't know. I don't think it's just that people want to make us all the same, universally human, and that comes first. I think, and especially Judaism and real Christianity, not like the watered down version, but I think it sets a standard of right from wrong and good and evil that people don't want to be reminded of. I think people nowadays, they want no responsibility for anything, and they want a free pass for any kind of behavior that they want to indulge in. And really, the only way that they can justify that is to do away with the legitimacy of the religions that set those standards for them to begin with. Yes? No?
That's
What do
the
you
input
think?
of the liberal left media as well.
Well, which is godless, completely
That's-
godless.
Well,
Completely godless.
to take on the responsibility of being, and this is from the Bible, I mean, from the Torah, that the Jewish destiny is to be a holy nation. I mean, that is what Jewish destiny is about. And when you want to fit in, or this concept embarrasses you, because God
Right.
forbid you claim that your heritage might be superior to somebody else's way of life, or superior, God forbid, that is
Right.
racist.
Right.
That is being particularistic.
Right.
That is rejecting this universal messianic brotherhood of the, again, I talk about the Enlightenment often, but it really comes to mind. That responsibility is a big responsibility. And if you don't want it, and if it embarrasses you, and you can't explain why you live the way you live your life. And I think Carolyn Glick went towards that in
Right.
the article. That if you are embarrassed about your way of life, if you are embarrassed about saying why you are superior, and by the way, superiority is not a matter of blood or race, it's an idea
Right.
that's superior.
Right.
What is wrong with saying that your way of life is in some way not a better in terms of, but in a way
Well, it is better.
It is. It's about saying, and the whole moral relativism, that slippery slope
Yeah.
is saying, well, everything's equal, let's level the playing field, but that's not life. And the fact is that the challenges for American Jewry are even greater because,
Everybody hates us.
well, that's one issue, CJ. I mean, the anti-Semitism.
Everybody wants to kill
This
us,
is
for
true.
heaven's sake.
Yes.
But also, besides the anti-Semitism, let me give you some idea of how a Jew in medieval times lived his or her life.
Okay.
Okay, so in Venice in the 16th century, early 16th century, we had the ghetto. It wasn't the Holocaust ghetto, it wasn't the Nazi ghetto. It was
A ghetto of our own design. We wanted to separate ourselves
Throughout
from
history,
the surrounding communities
before they
because
were
we don't want their ideas to
Yeah.
water down our way of life.
People think that ghetto, I mean, the ghetto was imposed in Venice, was
The ghetto
imposed
comes
in
from
France.
get.
But, well, it comes from, actually, the ghetto in Venice comes from the foundry, because that's where the ghetto was. It was in an area that had been used for metalworking.
Good grief.
But throughout history, people think that Jews were forced to live apart in ancient Alexandria, in medieval Granada, in southern Spain, in along the Rhineland. People think that, it was persecution and Jews were forced to live apart. No, Jews wanted to live apart. Why? Because even the medieval Jew who was persecuted or humiliated, whether in Islamic or Christian lands or in the pagan world, whatever the case was, Jews chose to live. It was their choosing to live together in a Jewish quarter because they could not imagine being anything else.
And it was safer.
And it was safer. Well, not always. In Alexandria, they had a lot of problems. I mean, the pagans didn't like, especially the Greeks, didn't. The Romans were far more charitable. The Roman leadership was far more charitable, but the Hellenists were very angry at the Jews for wanting to try to attain rights in the city that would have equaled them to the pagan population.
Right. Well, that was part of it too. Was they didn't have the same rights as the surrounding communities did anyway, and so they had to rely on themselves in a different kind of way.
And they wanted
didn't
to. They wanted to rely on themselves.
Right.
And they lived apart.
Like today's American ghettos want to rely upon themselves.
Well, there was.
That was a joke, Rabbi.
I know.
I'm letting him do all the jokes. I will not do any jokes on the air today.
But no, and also, again, I don't want to belabor the point, but there was a superiority complex. Jews believed they were superior, and of course, one could say, well, maybe it was inherent racism, or maybe it was, but that's what this whole moral relativism thing is about. Nobody wants to be able to explain why their way of life is superior. Everything is a level playing field, everything is equal, but the fact is, you look at what's happened in the West in modernity, not everything is equal, and religion is on the defensive.
Right.
So precisely at that time is the time you have to explain, why is my way of life superior? And if Seinfeld and Lox and Bagels are your attachment to Judaism and not the treasure house of culture and heritage and history and faith, you are in big trouble, because ethnic food and ethnic humor go a very short way towards describing why you are who you are.
Well, how did we lose these treasures?
How
did they get lost? Because if you even go back 40 years, you would get a very different picture of these numbers than you have today.
Well,
something's happening within Judaism. It's not just the culture outside. Something is happening within Judaism. Judaism is becoming de-Jewified. I don't know how to say. I don't know how to say it. They have taken God out of Judaism to attract more people who are Jewish to Judaism, to participate in it, to make it more comfortable for them. And therefore, there's no standards.
It's like the
there's
Republicans.
No standards in
It's like the Republicans trying to move to the middle to get voters. It's like
either stand for something or don't, people will vote for it no matter what it is.
You know, Republicans. You know, if you haven't noticed, trying to get a moderate candidate isn't helping. You know, the candidates with the strongest backing. You know, the most ferocious backers and grassroots are those that have a backbone and stand for something. So it's like, why would you try? Here, I'm attracting you with watered down Judaism. It's like the Republican trying to be middle of the road and attract someone with watered down conservatism.
Exactly.
Which isn't conservatism. And watered down Judaism isn't really Judaism.
And people know it. They know it.
They know when they're getting the fake.
They can read into that, and they know it. And as a result, who wants a defective product? Who wants to have watered down gin? We want to have our gin straight. We want to have our vodka straight. We don't want to start watering it down.
My Manischewitz.
I always tell people when they ask me where do I go for services, and I tell them where I go, you know, for which type of service and what I like in this place or this place. And I say, will I go there because I like a little religion with my religion,
right?
Because I might have gone to 6 other. You know, right now I go to I go to your synagogue.
Yes, you do.
And and I'm also a member of another one that was like my family synagogue by my mother. I'm a 2-timer. And but I went to I don't know 4 or 5 different conservative synagogues before I found one where I was hearing from the pulpit something to do with God and Judaism, which I was not hearing anywhere else. Everything else was this mush, tikkun olam, and we stand with everybody and for everything. And if you stand for everything, then it means nothing.
I tried to go to a temple the other day, and they had an Iranian who had just written a book about Christ, and who is a Muslim. And he is a criminal, Jew hater in a synagogue. Please explain.
Yeah, he's the scholar in residence.
Scholar in residence. I was a scholar in residence in my synagogue. You can be modern, but this is the thing. One can be a modern Jew, can embrace aspects of modernity, but again, for me, the pivotal point, besides maybe, although in America it's a different dynamic, but the pivotal point is really the French Revolution, emancipation, enlightenment. These things are not they benefited Jews in terms of having equality, and that's wonderful. It's wonderful not to be a persecuted minority, not to be in a humiliated status either in the Christian or a dhimmi in the Islamic world. No one wants to be humiliated. But the bargain was, well, you embrace everything and become one of us and forget about your past. Jettison that, because that's medieval, that's superstitious, that's religion, that's divisive. It's a total funhouse mirror. It's a distortion of the way things really were. And the fact is, as much as I am a law-abiding American citizen who loves our Constitution, studies our founding fathers, reads Ralph Waldo Emerson and Hemingway and Faulkner, it doesn't mean you sell out. It doesn't mean you sell your soul and give up more than 3,000 years of some persecution, but many great things. I mean, I would say glory, but I don't want to make it to,
You don't want to sound too superior.
I don't want to sound too superior, but there is an element of glory in being able to be a part of a civilization that is thousands of years old, that has not only survived, but has thrived throughout the world. And even in the fact that it was the target of persecution and even of genocide, shows you how powerful that idea was and still is. So why would somebody just, as I've said before, at other times, why would somebody, knowing they were living in a hovel, but sitting on a treasure chest of gold and diamonds and precious stones, why would somebody ignore that and try to not live in a better place? And it's not about rejecting modernity or having to be fundamentalist. It's the idea that, come on, as a thinking, rational, and emotional and human, as a human being,
right?
Why would somebody want to totally dilute for reasons of comfort or the matter of fitting in, or I don't know what it is, but you go back to 19th century Reform Judaism.
Well, I think you hit on something right there, where you said thinking people, and really that's yeah. People don't really think anymore. And this treasure trove that we're sitting on, either we don't know it's there, or the people who have the keys to the treasure chest who are supposed to share it with everybody else and say, look here, we have these wonderful treasures with which I am familiar, and I would like to share what I know about these treasures with you. That is not happening. When you go to the synagogue and you don't hear about the treasures that your synagogue is built on, then you walk away wondering, what did you go for, unless it was to say hi to your neighbors or your business partners or the people you haven't seen since the last bar mitzvah. There's no reason other than that to be there.
A lot of the Reform synagogues are basically just that. It's for socialization, much more than it is for any religious purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
they're there to see and be seen, and have the kids play with those kids, and the
Right.
wives go, hey, what are you doing during the week? Let's drop the kids off and go have a couple martinis at lunch.
Right.
It's certainly not about religion at the majority of the Reform temples.
Well, what's happened is that this idea of ethical humanism has become a religion. That's become, and the sense of, and Tikkun Olam has its place. The idea of
Right.
repairing the world has its place throughout Judaism.
Right.
In any denomination of Judaism, and there is again, treasure trove of ethical, and I'm teaching at my synagogue Ethics of Our Fathers, which is an ancient rabbinic text on ethics.
Mm-hmm.
There is Judaism is not just a cold religion of law.
Right.
There is a treasure trove of ethical literature,
Exactly.
treasure trove of philosophical literature. But CJ, I mean, the whole issue of thinking, once you think about it, and once you think about your own personal integrity, not just as a Jew or a person of faith, but as a human being, at some point, you've got to think about your integrity as a person. And when, for me, when I watched Seinfeld, and there were some elements of it that were humorous, but when I watched Seinfeld, I'm a fan of some of Woody Allen's older movies, like Love
like
and
in
Death.
the 70s.
And, Love and Death is a funny spoof on
Right. My
Russian
land,
literature.
my land.
My land, Russian literature and
Yeah.
Dostoevsky and Tolstoy.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
But when you look at Seinfeld's parents, and by extension,
You're going to lose me here because I've never seen
oh,
it.
okay.
But,
When you look at,
but everybody else has, so go ahead.
or you look at,
What kind of Jew are you, CJ?
you look at George's parents. I don't even know if George is ethnically Jewish in the show. But
No,
you look
he's
at
Italian.
no, you look at George's parents, who are sort of this, the ethnic parents, and you look at Seinfeld's parents. I mean, I wish I could laugh, but I'm disgusted because I am a son of the Maccabees. I am a son of Bar Kokhba, of Maimonides, of Sadia, of not only great thinkers and great warriors, but of a great civilization. And to reduce it to these foolish figures who make you embarrassed to be Jewish, because the depth of their Judaism is, again, going back to Caroline Glick, is this Bagels and Lox Jewish humor, guilt-inducing, Woody Allen-like. It is an embarrassment, because it's about sacrificing your own integrity. And it's not even on a religious level alone. It's on a level of, my God, I am the inheritor of a great civilization. It's been reduced to this.
Well, that's what the American culture is now. This is not unique to Judaism now. It's more obvious because we stick out more.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not unique. It's because I bet if you look at these numbers, and we have a bunch of graphs that we didn't even get to, because we could do like 5 shows on this subject.
One
But
thing I was starting
if
to
you
tell the
if you
rabbi,
look at
yeah.
if you were to compare the attitudes that Americans have right now towards the United States with the attitudes that Jewish Americans have towards Judaism, it would probably be the same thing. It would probably be really close. Instead of not believing in or having any connection to the Constitution, then if you're Jewish, you have no connection to the Torah and Israel. It's the same kind of thing. The founding documents, the history that made you who you are, that made your life possible in the here and now the way that it is, they don't exist for you anymore.
Again, it goes to this issue of, I would say that the Jewish disassociation from Israel and the lack of connection to faith and to the Torah and to religion does have its parallel in American life, in general American life, in that you take a look, for example, again, it's about not thinking, CJ.
That's what I'm saying.
It's about not thinking. It's about
The
saying.
whole culture
it's about
doesn't think.
saying and using and totally embracing modernity without thinking about the value of the medieval and ancient world or the value of the founding fathers. So, for example, just like throwing out the baby with the bathwater in terms of religion, saying, well, Jefferson, he owns slaves, therefore he's a total hypocrite when he writes all men are created equal, therefore write him off as just another white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male racist who was the founder of a country that bears guilt for oppressing peoples of the world, especially peoples of color, and obviously there was in America slavery and Jim Crow.
Right.
But this idea of this modern litmus test, where if somebody doesn't live up to your criterion of what is modern, therefore throw them out, throw them away.
Right.
When Jefferson said
Columbus Day is evil now,
because
500 years ago, this is what the people of that time believed. And you're judging us now for 500 years ago for an Italian guy.
But also by not understanding that Jefferson, by saying all men are created equal, is saying something so completely revolutionary and brilliant for its time, even though, yes, it was defective because Jefferson owned slaves.
It wasn't pure.
But his call for freedom from tyranny inspired Lincoln to deliver the Gettysburg Address, to emancipate African slaves,
I'm glad you brought that up.
It's so non-thinking. It's so ideological.
I'm
that,
glad you're bringing this up, because this non-thinking, this equalizing the playing field, this moral relativism, if that's all it were, it would be one thing.
Yeah.
But it's not just taking away the glory and the recognition of our Judeo-Christian heritage, or our Judaism, or our Christianity, depending on where you're coming from. They're not just saying we're all equal. They're elevating to a different status totalitarian ideologies and pseudo-religions that really are the antithesis of ethical humanism and tolerance that these people who want to silence Judaism and Christianity are supposedly standing for. So how is it that they're going the other way? We have so many people in the Jewish community in the United States who hate their co-religionists.
Yeah.
You're too Orthodox, I don't want to know from you. You're too Reform, I don't want to know from you. You're in the middle, you're okay, but only if you vote the same way I do. And everybody has their own little ghetto wall that they're building up against their fellow Jewish people.
Yeah.
But they're going to smash down that wall and build bridges of peace with the people who want to kill them. So they don't want to hear from Orthodox Jews in New York, but they're perfectly happy to welcome into their synagogues and their schools Palestinian terrorists who want to take away Jewish land.
It's very
and
skewed.
guilt them into it.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, in terms of this leveling of the playing field, which is really not leveling of the playing field, because what it does is elevates other
evil
ways
over
of what
everything
it does.
else is what it does.
It really, leveling the playing field is a nice term, and fairness, it's a nice term for I'm not going to think for myself.
It's a nice term for fixing the outcome of the race.
I'm not going to think about
why would you get into it?
I'm not going to think about why maybe the way I live my life might be superior or better, or for me might be better. it really is an excuse. It's an excuse not to think and not to have some introspection and some self-knowledge about who you are.
And escape responsibility.
And it is an escape from responsibility.
Exactly, because if you have that sense of responsibility and you have that strong self-identity and you know what you believe in and why you believe it, it doesn't just inform you in terms of your personal ethics or your religious views or your relationship with God. It carries over into everything else in your life. So everything else in your life is going by the wayside because your worldview is not informed to begin with by the most positive aspect of that life.
It goes in two different directions. One direction is obviously something we've discussed, is that Tikkun Olam being sort of a cult of ethics is not going to work, and has nothing, and is apart from any sense of Jewish destiny or divine destiny. But also, I would argue that the reason I myself am not a fundamentalist in the Jewish world is that the sole focus on ritual alone is also damaging. Ritual can't be the end. It's got to be a means to an end. The means to the end is the idea of being a holy nation with a divine mission.
Right.
And the problem really is on both sides about the issue of thinking about knowing who you are.
Right.
That if Jewish destiny is going to be about just going to a soup kitchen, there's a problem.
Right.
If Jewish destiny is just about looking,
how kosher is the
looking
soup?
on a light under a light and seeing whether there are microscopic bugs in your broccoli,
right,
then you got a problem as well.
Right.
Because where is the destiny in that? Now, I'm not saying ritual is not critical. It is.
Right.
And its basis is in faith and history. But again, it comes down to something that is alien to Judaism, alien until now, which is you confront the world around you.
Right.
Whether it's Philo in ancient Alexandria or Sadia Gaon in Babylonia in the 9th and 10th century, or Maimonides, or looking, to modern thinkers. I think of an Orthodox thinker, Rabbi Irving Greenberg. The whole issue is you confront the world. You don't run away either by totally compartmentalizing yourself and rejecting everything,
right,
but not by embracing everything.
Right.
And certainly the parallel with watering down and this whole issue about the American Constitution, the foundational text, the Federalist Papers, it definitely has a parallel.
Yeah.
But for me, it comes down to faith, but also it comes down to integrity and the need to do something because you want to fit in. Or because you want to be comfortable, because you don't want to confront the world.
Or because you are comfortable and you don't want to take on anything that reeks of responsibility.
Yeah.
Or an obligation to your community or your family that you don't feel like taking on because you'd rather hang out and watch TV or go out or whatever, and you don't want to be responsible.
There are easy ways in the world not to challenge yourself. It's very simple to coast along and not question things. Very easy or it's very easy to either accept everything or reject everything.
Right.
The path of confronting and thinking is a difficult path, can often be a struggle. And no, life shouldn't have to be a struggle. But, this idea of I'm going to coast in the 75, 80, or 100 years I have of life,
right,
that's what it's going to be about.
Right.
That for me, at least personally, that's not the way to live one's life.
Right.
It sounds meaningless.
It absolutely is, and these numbers reflect it. Jewish because of the Holocaust. 20% of those who were raised Orthodox no longer consider them. They've dropped off the Judaism map.
Well, to a certain extent, rabbis and Orthodox institutions have to take some of the blame, not all of it, but some of the blame for that in terms of the failure to retain Orthodox Jews within the denomination.
Right.
But there's a lot of work that needs to be done,
and
especially.
What about Israel? these low numbers
Yeah.
of identification with Israel, like in the 40%, caring about Israel is one of the, if we can put that one up. Yeah, caring about Israel, Jews by religion, 49%. Consider that an essential part of being Jewish. Good grief.
Yeah.
Now, Rabbi, I don't see it on this particular slide, but you told me earlier that whereas around 43% of Jews believe in Israel being important
Yeah.
to Judaism, and you said it was over 80% of evangelical Christians, right?
Yeah.
Look at some of your numbers, because we're getting down to the last 3 minutes
All
of
right.
the show.
Thank you.
Hit me with some of your important numbers.
82% of white evangelicals believe that God gave Israel as a holy land to the Jewish people.
Yeah.
40% of American Jews believe the same thing.
Right.
What's the matter with us?
Right.
It's Jewicide.
Right. But let me ask you real quick, both of you, or all of you, if I'm talking to Damon here. How do we defend the Jewish state of Israel against our enemies who want to nuke Israel? Why? How can we even put pressure on the United States government vis-a-vis a country like Iran, who says quite openly, we want to wipe the Zionist cancer off the map?
He's a moderate. I hear he's a moderate.
Who's going to put pressure on our elected leaders to defend the Jewish state of Israel when the Jewish people of the United States do not defend the Jewish state of Israel? And those leaders come back to us and say, you folks don't even care about it. Why should we?
You know, if I have people, have said to me, Jews have said to me, well, we lived without Israel for 2,000 years. We can live without Israel again for another 2,000 years. That is the most ridiculous and dangerous statement that could be made.
Right.
The fact is, Israel, even for most Orthodox Jews, most Jews who have remained within the religious fold, and some conservative Jews, to a certain extent, maybe some Jews in the Reform movement, Israel is so central. That's why the Birthright program doesn't send Jewish kids to Jewish young adults to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, doesn't send them to Borough Park, or to Crown Heights, or to New Square, or to Los Angeles,
South Beach,
or to South Beach, or to Boca, or to Lake Worth. They send them to Israel. There's a reason for that. They're not sending them to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, to the bastions of liberal Judaism. They're not sending them to New Square, the bastions of Satmar Hasidism. They're sending them to Israel. That is an indication of why Israel is so central. Why are they sending them there? Because they want these kids to see a living, breathing Jewish state, which is critical to Jewish survival. So this idea that, even 49% of Jews by religion feel Israel is essential is even that's distressing. I mean,
that's extremely distressing.
That's very
extremely
very
distressing.
problematic.
Yes.
So.
Well, I won't say this about you because you do a very good job, but I would say to the rabbis in general that you need to do a better better job to educate your congregation about being Jewish and about loving and supporting Israel. And I want to thank you,
Thank
Rabbi
you very
Kavon,
much.
for being here today. It was absolutely wonderful to have a whole hour.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming,
with
Rabbi.
you. And thank you all for watching and listening. Stay tuned. We have a really special guest tomorrow, which it's a secret. I can't even tell you. You just have to tune in tomorrow on WNN 1470 AM, TrentoVision. Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow.